The Chicago Bears are counting on a few recent Ryan Poles draft picks to really take a big step forward this season in their own individual development. Because if they don't, this team could be in some trouble.
You are Locked On Bears, your daily Chicago Bears podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
This is Locked On Bears, and I'm your host, Lauren Cox. I'm here to bring you your daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. You can follow me on Twitter at CoxSports1. You can follow the podcast at Locked On Bears on all of your favorite social media platforms, including the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, where you can keep up with all of our video podcasts as well. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use our promo code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. On the show today, we look at some key Chicago Bears players that were Ryan Poles draft picks over the last handful of seasons that are in important roles that need to take a step forward, that the Bears are counting on these guys that they could have tried to upgrade over at some point, but said, you know what, no, we're going to trust our coaches to develop them and hope that these players that Ryan Poles believed in the draft can start to live up closer to their full potential and be those difference makers for this team. Because if they don't, they might be in kind of tricky situations if they're getting inconsistency at some of these key spots. A lot of it is in the trenches on both sides of the ball, but a couple of skill position players as well that have had flashes along the way and have generally done well, and it's like, all right, now it's go time. Let's see what they can do and step up in a big way. I want to start on the offensive line because both offensive tackles fall into this category for me, although it's kind of a slightly different story for each one. But Braxton Jones at left tackle, for example, we talked throughout the offseason, kind of from the beginning, about whether or not the Bears would look for an upgrade at left tackle, what that might look like, what level of faith and confidence did they have in Braxton Jones after 2 seasons where he was good. I mean, I thought he was good. He wasn't great. He made mistakes. Wasn't perfect. And I think there's a pretty wide debate among Bears fans throughout this offseason of like, okay, how confident should we be in Braxton Jones? And should they go out and get like some veteran competition for him in free agency, even if it's not like a clear-cut upgrade, but just someone where it's going to be, okay, a truly open battle to kind of push him and say, hey, we need you to be better, and we're going to have a backup plan just in case you aren't better. But instead, they don't sign any big names. I mean, they signed like a end-of-the-roster kind of offensive tackles, but not a real competition there. They go in the NFL draft, and they do take Karan Amagaji in the 3rd round out of Yale. Okay, so they did do something at offensive tackle, but they knew Amagaji was dealing with this injury when they drafted him. They knew, maybe they didn't know exactly what the timeline was going to be, but like they knew he wasn't going to come into rookie minicamp and then OTAs and start competing with Braxton Jones right away. Like, yes, they've said he'll compete at tackle, but they've already kind of deemed him the swing tackle, right? They said that's kind of more the expectation for this season. He could push Braxton Jones sometime down the line, but we're not going into training camp in a couple weeks thinking, oh, that's a wide open battle at left tackle. Who's going to win? We don't know. Like, Braxton Jones is going to be your left tackle this season. They may end up even using Amagaji at guard because some of the questions there. So there wasn't really that true upgrade attempt over Braxton Jones. A lot of Bears fans wanted someone like Joe Alt in the 1st round of the draft. Obviously, he wasn't there when they were on the clock, but there were other offensive tackles available at that time. They could have taken a tackle instead of Rome Odunze at wide receiver to really say, you know what, we need to do better at this spot. Like, Ryan Poles kind of pick and chose where he thought, hey, we're going to trust the guys that we have and develop them versus where we're going to go out and make sure we upgrade. Because like at wide receiver, for example, you've got Tyler Scott. No one's here thinking he was going to be a number 1 wide receiver or anything, but he was a 4th-round pick last season who had a couple of plays here and there, and they could have said, you know what, we'll have DJ Moore. We're gonna need Tyler Scott to develop and get better, and then maybe sign a free agent or something, and that could be your wide receiver core. We could be having this conversation about how the Bears are counting on Tyler Scott to get better this year, to be an important weapon in this offense. But instead they said, you know what, we're not going to count on that development. We're gonna double or triple down at wide receiver with Allen and Rome Odunze. And they could have done the same thing at offensive tackle, right? They could have said, all right, like, we're doubling down at left tackle. We're going to go get Joe Alt with the 9th overall pick, or we're going to go out in free agency and really get some kind of big-time offensive tackle here to just leave no doubt, leave no question about whether or not Braxton Jones or whether or not your left tackle position is an A plus left tackle or a B or C tackle, depending on what that development looks like. And I mean, it's a similar conversation for Darnell Wright. Not that they were going to go out and like upgrade or create competition for him, but like you need both of your offensive tackles to be really solid, steady, foundational pieces for Caleb Williams. I mean, that pressure from the outside, either in his face on the Darnell Wright side or his blind side on Braxton Jones's end, like both of those players have had up and down inconsistency. I mean, I think Darnell Wright, as a rookie, you expect he had a lot of penalties. That happens for rookies. And, a couple of lapses here and there, like that was all fine. He had a solid rookie season, but he is a top 10 pick. And so like, we got to start seeing more of that top 10 talent. Like the Bears are looking for a top 10 quality player with that pick 2 years ago. And of course, he's not going to be that as a rookie. And maybe not even in year 2, he's not going to be his full potential yet. But like, you think about what our expectations are for Rome Odunze for his career, right? How special we think Rome Odunze can be. 9th overall pick. Darnell Wright, 10th overall pick, but they could have taken him at 9. They just moved down one spot. Like, think about like those kind of expectations for Darnell Wright, just at, the offensive tackle version versus the wide receiver version. Like that's what you're hoping to get out of top 10 picks. And so for Caleb Williams to be at his best, for this offense to be at his best, for Caleb to develop properly, like you need Darnell Wright to play more like a top 10 offensive tackle, to keep getting farther along in that process. You need Braxton Jones to take a nice step in year 3, and you need this offensive line coaching to help these players get to that next level, especially given some of the question marks we might have on the interior where, it's still an open competition at center. We don't know who the starter is going to be there. Nate Davis at right guard has, availability issues over the last year and change that he's been on the team. So we don't always know how reliable he's going to be. And then as good as Tevin Jenkins is at left guard, he's never played a full season in his career. He's been hurt at least a little bit every season so far. And so there might be varying levels of question marks or concerns about the interior guys. So you really then need your 2 tackles to be Iron Men on the field every snap, getting better, and not having to worry about, okay, is there going to be a lapse here? Is Caleb going to get blindsided by someone who just, Braxton Jones has a bad play and gets beat? Like, of course, every tackle is never going to be perfect, right? You're going to get beat sometimes. But if you can really say, okay, those 2 are just foundational cornerstones, that's the word I've been looking for the last 3 minutes, cornerstones of the offensive line, at least then, okay, then you can focus all your energy on the interior and trying to help that out with pass protection and, how you're sliding protections and running backs and trying all that stuff. Like if you're going to have questions on the inside, let's make sure the outside is super, super solid. Clearly, it seems like the offensive line is that spot where the Bears are counting on development a little bit more than the other skill spots on offense. But I think there is one other skill player that they're counting on some development from a younger player. And same thing is true on defense, where it's probably mostly in the trenches there, but it's another guy a little bit farther away from the ball I want to get into. So we'll look at some of the other key players that need to develop and take a step forward for this Bears team to be at its best next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. It's the winning formula for winning championships, and it's also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. We're talking superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your vehicle, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. The Chicago Bears aren't necessarily counting on Roschon Johnson in the exact same critical way as the offensive tackles, but to me, he's a young player that they need to develop and take a step forward this season for the long-term and short-term health of this Chicago Bears offense. Unlike the offensive tackles, they obviously did address the running back position with a big signing in free agency in DeAndre Swift. He's going to be your number 1 back, your leading rusher, your leading carries, the guy who on 1st and 10, he's getting the ball the vast majority of the time. But that doesn't mean he's going to be the only player who gets ball, right? Like, you don't really see teams go purely just the number one running back takes it all the time. Like, the true workhorse days are mostly gone. Like, players like Derrick Henry or whoever, like, do get the lion's share of the loads. But, like, even on teams that have a Derrick Henry type player, those number 2 backs are still really important to be a break for them. And also in a lot of those situations, like passing downs, receiving out of the backfield and pass protection. DeAndre Swift certainly offers a lot as a receiver out of the backfield. And so what exactly the running back rotation then looks like will be interesting to me. But there's an opportunity here for Roschon Johnson to be that number 2 back, not just this season, but for the foreseeable future. Because as we've gotten closer to training camp, there's been quite a bit of speculation. I won't say rumors, because I don't think anyone has reported anything concrete about this. I don't think there's any legitimate information coming from the Chicago Bears to suggest this. It's just people looking at it and trying to connect the dots here and maybe make up something that doesn't seem super realistic to me. But you've probably read an article or seen a tweet or something of somebody suggesting, could Khalil Herbert be on the block? Could he be a surprise training camp cut for the Chicago Bears, or a potential trade candidate after training camp? And, well, I think cutting him would be a dumb idea all around. Trading him would be less dumb of an idea. But still, I think the smartest idea would be to keep him, because when you have a good running back, you shouldn't just be eager to get rid of him for, if you're trading him, you're going to get a late round draft pick. And if you're cutting him, you're not getting anything. So it doesn't seem worth moving on from him. He's not expensive. There's not really a good reason to. But there is an opportunity for Roschon Johnson to pass him as the number 2 running back here. Because if you think about DeAndre Swift getting the lead number of carries, whatever that looks like, then presumably if he's carrying the ball on 1st and or 2nd down, like, he might need that break on 3rd down. And so that means you need your backup running back to be more effective as a receiver out of the backfield and a blocker in the backfield. And Khalil Herbert has consistently struggled as a receiver out of the backfield and a blocker out of the backfield, especially the blocking. I think the receiving thing out of the backfield with Herbert, like, it's not like he has dropped an inordinate number of passes. I think he's dropped some, but it's not like, oh man, that guy's got terrible hands. And I don't even think he's a terrible route runner either. I think the receiving out of the backfield thing with Herbert feels a little bit more situational to me. He doesn't get a lot of opportunities, and he's not put in a lot of good opportunities to make plays as a receiver out of the backfield. It's kind of a separate conversation, but I think that aspect might be a little bit overblown, but the pass protection thing is definitely an issue. And those are both areas that Roschon Johnson was better as a rookie. That's kind of how it played out. He was a better receiver and certainly a better blocker between the two out of the backfield. And so that's Roschon Johnson's ability to get playing time in this offense and play a key role when DeAndre Swift is not on the field. Because whether they get rid of Khalil Herbert during training camp for some reason, or they let the year play out, like, he's going to be a free agent next year. And it's hard to envision a scenario where the Bears give Khalil Herbert another contract. Like, you've got DeAndre Swift under contract for 2 additional seasons. You got Roschon Johnson for 2 more years on his rookie deal. Like, I don't think they're going to also then pay Khalil Herbert. So whether it's by week 1 or next offseason, like, they're going to need Roschon Johnson to be a big player in this offense and to be that spell back for DeAndre Swift and play. Again, it's not going to be 90% Swift, 10% Herbert, 10% Johnson. It's going to be, 60% Swift, 30% number 2 back, 10% the other. Something like that. Or maybe it's 60-20-20 or 70-50. I don't know what the split's going to be, but like, these are going to be important snaps for Roschon Johnson, and the Bears need him to get better so that they can go into next season saying, yep, it's Swift and Roschon, and that's a really solid backfield, and we don't need to worry about adding anything else at that position. So that's where I still think Roschon matters, and his development is important this season, even if it's not maybe as critical as the 2 offensive tackles, and they did at least upgrade at that position. I think the same thing is similar on the other side of the ball with another pick from that same draft class, Tyrique Stevenson. He's a player who does need to get better this past season. Like, I think we all associate Tyrique Stevenson's rookie season with being really good. He made a bunch of big plays on the ball that we were all really excited about. And we're all really excited about what his development can be here moving forward. But it's easy to forget some of the times he got burned, some of the big touchdowns he gave up, some of the big moments. There were some big plays where he was out of position and just not where he needed to be. And he made up for it a lot with so many of the nice plays on the ball, the interceptions, the pass breakups. Like, he made some phenomenal plays on the ball and also made some really tough ones not close enough on the ball. Like, he was perhaps the most boom or bust cornerback in football last season. When you look at some of just like the raw numbers in terms of like coverage data from Pro Football Focus, Tyreek Stevenson was the second most targeted cornerback in football last season. I don't remember the name of the other cornerback. It wasn't a household name guy, another young guy. But like some of that's because Jalen Johnson's on the other side. So what, are you going to throw at Jalen Johnson or are you going to throw at the rookie? Sure. But at the same time, other quarterbacks could also throw at the linebackers, throw at the safeties, throw at Kyler Gordon in the slot. Like, it wasn't like the quarterback's only choice was Jalen Johnson or Tyreek, so they picked Tyreek every time. They picked Tyreek a lot because he was getting beat a decent amount. He gave up the second most catches and the third most yards of any cornerback in football. So not just a bunch of targets, but when he was targeted, gave up 72 catches for 836 yards last season. Top 5 in targets allowed, catches allowed, yards allowed. And he gave up 9 touchdowns, which is the most, I think tied for the most, but the most of any cornerback in football. So like bottom 5 in all the major, like plays allowed statistical categories: targets, catches, yards, touchdowns. Bottom 3, I should say, in all 3 of those plays. Like, he gave up a lot of catches for a lot of yards and a lot of touchdowns. And that's not good. Like, if you just took that in a vacuum, you'd say, well, that was a bad season for a cornerback. But then you add on his 4 interceptions, which was tied for the 5th most in the NFL among corners. I would not have pegged Jalen Johnson as being tied for 5th in interceptions in the NFL, but that's top 5 in interceptions. And then he had 13 pass breakups by PFF's pass breakup definition, which is a little bit different than I think the standard pass breakup definition. I don't know the exact minutia there, but it's slightly different. But 13 pass breakups was the 3rd most among cornerbacks. So Jalen Johnson was top 5 in interceptions and pass breakups, but also bottom 5 in targets, catches, yards, and touchdowns. So like, that is the true boom or bust. Gave up big plays, made huge plays for his defense. And I think he made enough of those huge plays that outweighed a lot of the bad plays. And certainly in our memories, I think we think of the good and don't remember as much of the bad as vividly. But like, heading into year 2 then, they need him to not give up the 2nd most catches and 3rd most yards of any cornerback in football. Yeah, he's still going to get targeted a lot more than Jalen Johnson, but he's got to be better on those targets. Like, keep making the good plays and just cut down on the bad plays, and that's fine. Like, his rookie season was not bad by any means. He had a really strong rookie season in a lot of ways. Just need to clean up some of the mistakes there so that this secondary isn't getting gashed in that area. Just a few too many big plays that held this defense back, especially early on in the season last year. Like, if Tyreek Stevenson takes that next step forward, that's how you become a top 5 defense. Like, that's how you have one of the best, if not the best, secondaries in the NFL. And if he doesn't, it makes the pass rush's job that much harder if the quarterback's getting rid of the ball quickly because he's got open players. Like, there's some ripple effects there for the rest of this Bears defense if Stevenson doesn't make that big year 2 leap and continues to kind of have some of the big ups, but also some of the big downs throughout this season. And certainly, again, it comes back to coaching, being able to like take advantage of his instincts when he makes those plays on the ball, but like coach him up to not make some of those same mistakes along the way in that process. Certainly, coaching is going to be perhaps most critical on the defensive line more than anywhere else, given the talent deficiencies that the Bears have there, but also the high influx of young players, recent Ryan Poles draft picks that absolutely need to step up for this defensive line and this pass rush to look anything close to, starting quality in the NFL. So we'll look at a couple of guys there that the Bears need big seasons from, that development is perhaps most paramount for guys that they drafted with the purpose of developing them, and now it's getting to be time for that development to really start to show itself more consistently. That's next on Locked On Bears. This episode of Locked On Bears is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel Sportsbook, America's #1 sportsbook. And FanDuel is here to help and be there for you all summer long, no matter what your sports calendar looks like, because it's not a busy sports summer at this point. We're a little bit more into baseball, and now that the Stanley Cup Finals are over and the NBA Finals are over, there's not a lot else to get super excited about. But that's where FanDuel comes in, because you could bet on any and all sports that are going on, plus betting on futures. You can bet on this Bears upcoming season, the Week 1 odds against the Tennessee Titans, Caleb Williams' rookie season passing, Rome Odunze's rookie receiving yards, a Coach of the Year for Matt Eberflus. And all summer long, FanDuel is hooking up every customer with a boost or a bonus daily. That's right, there's something for everyone every day all summer long. So to take advantage of your daily boost or bonus, head over to FanDuel.com/lockedon and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel, official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. This Bears defensive line is counting on young players across the board, not named Montez Sweat, essentially, and didn't get the same investment that other positions have gotten, right? Like, of course, they traded for Montez Sweat during the season, but they really didn't do much in terms of free agency. They signed, Jacob Martin from the Colts, and then they drafted Austin Booker in the 5th round. Like, those are a similar level of investment to me, right? Like a veteran minimum type free agent and a 5th round pick is all they really put into this defensive line externally. The rest is counting on guys like Javon Dexter, DeMarcus Walker, Dominic Robinson to take a step forward, to Zach Pickens, I should mention as well, to develop and live up to more of their draft potential. And of course, DeMarcus Walker, they're not the Bears draft pick, but they do need him to get better and get back to what he was doing previously in Tennessee. But as far as Ryan Poles draft picks go, Javon Dexter, Zach Pickens, Dominic Robinson, all three, to different degrees, are going to be counted on, as the roster stands right now, to be critical players in this pass rush and in the run defense as well. I don't mean to just focus on pass rush as the only thing that matters for them, but certainly the run defense is going to be a critical part of this too. And it's certainly asking a lot. But let's start with Dominic Robinson because he's the older of the three. This is his 3rd season, and last season was a step back for him. A healthy scratch after Montez Sweat was traded for. Like, Dominic Robinson went from somebody who was starting a couple games as a rookie to end of the bench to not playing by the end of his 2nd season. Expectations are very, very low. But let's not forget, Dominic Robinson was drafted, 5th round pick out of Miami of Ohio. And when he was drafted, we knew this was a raw, green defensive end prospect who had only been playing the position for like 2 total years of his life, switched to defensive end in college after playing wide receiver and quarterback before that. So we knew coming in, this guy was going to need a lot of work, and that's going to take a lot of time for this player to reach his full potential. And so I don't think anyone can conclude after 2 seasons of Dominic Robinson, who's still 25, I should mention, turns 26 in like a week, but still a 25-year-old player who is still learning how to play the position. I don't think the jury is out on what Dominic Robinson can be. I'm not here to predict that he's going to be a great player or have a great season and have this huge breakout, but I also think it's premature to say, nope, he's a bust. He's done. He'll never be anything good. Get rid of him. He's out. Like, maybe. I mean, honestly, probably, if we're playing the odds here, it is most likely the case. But there's still some potential in there. Like, I don't think we've seen the best Dominic Robinson can be. And if this defensive line coach, Justin Smith, and now, of course, their new defensive coordinator, Eric Washington, was formerly a defensive line coach, this is a defensive line heavy coaching staff. You need to coach up this defensive line. Get Dominic Robinson back to some of the flashes we were seeing earlier in his career, because we really weren't flashes much at all last season. But as a rookie, there were those moments where you're like, oh yeah, this is a wide receiver playing defensive end. Like, he is fast and long and a physical freak. And if you could just get the tools right, you could do something with those physical ability. Like, if you can just get the mechanics there, those tools, I guess the tools were there. You can just do something with the mechanics and the skills. Like, he's got the physical body that you want at that spot. So, like, there's still time for him to do that. And there's a great opportunity here on this defensive line where there's not a lot of depth there, and it's wide open after Montez Sweat, as far as I'm concerned. Like, he can do this. Like, especially if you're going to need DeMarcus Walker to play a little more defensive tackle to provide some depth there. I mean, already Dominic Robinson can be your number 3 edge rusher. And if Walker's going to kick inside a little more often, then that means more defensive end snaps for the likes of Dominic Robinson or other people on the depth chart. So, like, for a guy who was a healthy scratch sometimes last season, like, he's got the shot at a big role here. If he can develop a little bit more and start living up closer to that potential, that we really could see the tools there. I mean, there's hope for Dominic Robinson still. There's similar hope for Javon Dexter, just drafted 3 rounds earlier, but another player when drafted, super raw prospect, but has the physical tools and the body to be potentially great at that position. The problem is, for defensive linemen, it takes a while to adjust. I mean, especially defensive tackle, but defensive end too. Like, it can take 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years before these players really kind of start to reach their full potential. We did a whole podcast about Javon Dexter on Monday, so I don't want to rehash the entire thing here. But you look at some of the best defensive tackles in the NFL, not named Aaron Donald, they didn't really hit their stride until years 3, 4, and 5. Talk about guys like Justin Madubuike from Ravens, didn't have his breakout until year 4. Christian Wilkins from the Dolphins didn't have his breakout until year 5. Dexter Lawrence from the Giants, his breakout year was year 4. Jeffrey Simmons of the Titans, week 1 against the Bears, his breakout year was year 3. Even Chris Jones of the Chiefs, his breakout year was year 3. Like, none of those guys broke out in year 2, which is what Javon Dexter and Zach Pickens are coming into this season. So, like, I don't think it's realistic to expect those guys to have huge 8-sack breakout seasons. But hopefully between the two of them, Dexter and Pickens, they can each make a little progress, right? It's not like those defensive tackles were bad for 4 years and then great in year 4. It's just like, okay, you start out slow and then you slowly get better and then you take that jump. So, like, if someone like Javon Dexter can go from, I think he had 2.5 sacks last season. If he can just make that slow progress, not 2.5 to 8, but if you can go 2.5 to 4 or 2.5 to 5 sacks this season, like, that's a great step forward that will help this defensive line tremendously. And like last season, Zach Pickens had 0.5 sacks. Like, I think we had slightly higher expectations for Zach Pickens of being a little bit less raw of a prospect, but they did play him as more of a nose tackle, so he wasn't necessarily being utilized as a pin your ears back kind of pass rusher. But like, if he can step up and get a couple of sacks, all of a sudden you get, between the two of them, if you can get 6 or 7 sacks, okay, now we're starting to get somewhere in this defensive line. And add a couple sacks from Dominic Robinson, add another handful from DeMarcus Walker, and then, of course, you're hoping for 10 plus from Montez Sweat. Like, all of a sudden, if these young guys and these Ryan Poles draft picks develop, like, it starts to pay off. But it's been interesting to see that be Ryan Poles' strategy of saying, all right, we need these coaches to coach these guys up. They could have tried to do more on the defensive line. They could have drafted a defensive lineman earlier. They could have signed another defensive lineman or overpaid for one in free agency, but they chose not to. And they chose at that spot and at offensive tackle to just say, you know what? We've invested draft picks in guys. We need them to pan out. We're counting on them to pan out. And if they don't, your pass rusher is going to be in trouble and your offensive line is going to be in trouble. And to a lesser extent with Tyreek Stevenson, your secondary is going to have a slight hole in it there, or at least a vulnerability in it there. So that's where, like, that's the whole point of this podcast, right? It's like today's episode, right? Like, you need those guys to be better. They're counting on them when they could have realistically chosen upgrades and may still upgrade the defensive line between now and week 1. And we're expecting them to upgrade the defensive line to some degree, but they're probably not going to touch offensive tackle. So those guys, it's put up or shut up time for Braxton Jones, and they need Darnell Wright to take that step forward as well. Be curious if there's any other players you think the Bears are counting on that needs to develop. If there's anyone I missed here or anyone you're less worried about than I am or more worried about than I am, let us know in the comments here in the Locked On Bears YouTube channel, or you can tweet us at Locked On Bears or post in the Locked On Bears Facebook group. However you do it, just make sure you hit that subscribe button on YouTube or wherever you listen to the podcast, because that's going to be the best way to keep up with all of our daily, in-depth Chicago Bears news and analysis. Thanks for making Locked On Bears your first listen today. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And I know we're in the 1.5 slow months of the offseason where we don't do 5 days a week. It's more like 3 or 4, depending on how the week goes, but we're getting you ready for training camp. But if you're looking for a second listen, or maybe a first listen on the days when a day or two a week when we don't have Locked On Bears for you just this time of year, be sure to check out the Locked On Sports Today 24/7 stream. It's on the Locked On Sports Today YouTube channel or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. It's 24/7 sports coverage of the top sports stories of the day with local experts from across the Locked On Podcast Network without all the argument and shouting television you get on ESPN and Fox Sports. So find Locked On Sports Today, now available on its YouTube channel or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app. We're going to start getting closer to training camp previews here. We're just 2 or 3 weeks away. I think by the time, by Monday, we'll be 2 weeks away or so. It's like July 16th, the Bears rookies start reporting. So it's right around the corner. I hope you're getting fired up. I hope you're lasting through this slowest part of the offseason and hanging in with us. I appreciate you tuning in. And I hope that even in these summer football-less June days, that you still get another opportunity to bear down.